Welcome to the FilmSEEN podcast with your host, Zeph.
All right, on today's episode of FilmSEEN, we're pleased to have New York-based filmmaker Harry Greenberger. He's the writer and director of the upcoming film FARAWAY Eyes, starring Christina Ricci, Andy, Karl, and Nora Arnezeder, as well as the film Staring at the Sun with Taylor Rose and Jill Shackner. Welcome, Harry.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So I've had the privilege of watching both of Harry's feature films, and I really enjoyed each film. And what I particularly like is that they're very different types of movies. So according to IMDb, Faraway Eyes is listed as a comedy, fantasy, romance, while Staring at the Sun is listed as a drama.
That's about right.
And so we're going to discuss each film, but before we do that, I'd love to discuss your career prior to writing, directing. I see that you have a long list of IMDb credits, and that you worked on many projects from features to documentaries to music videos. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I always like to joke that I've done almost every position in the film business except for makeup and catering. And I came out of film school thinking, oh, no problem. I'll just wait till the first person hires me to direct a movie and just start a directing career. But that's an illusion that I was quickly disabused of. And I quickly found out that, that the work that's really available is, you start as a PA and the business sort of starts to try to figure out what you might be useful as. And I showed a little bit of aptitude towards the grip department and then quickly showed more aptitude towards the camera department and got hired as a camera assistant and was loading film mags for a long time, which is something you don't even have to do anymore. And then was pulling focus pretty quickly after that and sort of worked my way up, pulling focus on commercials and independent films for a while, and then followed that with sometimes being a camera operator and then sometimes being a DP and always writing along the way. And then realized at a certain point, there were a couple of times where I almost directed feature films that had come around that friends or acquaintances had, but usually it was just that those projects fell apart, funding wise or whatever. And then eventually started to figure out that music videos were a great way back into, like sort of a backdoor into it, where you could do a little short narrative, 3 minutes, and you didn't have to buy the rights to the music because it came with the project, and that opened the door to trying to get a feature off the ground.
Did you always want to segue into directing? Was that always the plan from you first getting into film?
Yeah, I wanted to direct movies since I was 9 years old. I was, when I saw Star Wars when I was 9, I was like, whatever it is that, whoever did that, whatever he's doing, I want to do that. And I think that happened to a lot of kids in my generation, that Star Wars, at least, if not ruined their life or changed their life, it certainly warped their life. And then, shortly after that, I started seeing more ambitious films, and those made me want to try to make more ambitious films. Like I always joke, I wanted to make movies, and then I wanted to make films, in quotes.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about your film, Staring at the Sun.
Well, it's kind of a coming of age story about two teenage Hasidic girls who can't stand living sort of under the thumb of the repressive religious community that they grew up in, and they reach a breaking point, and they feel that they have to leave, and they run away using the family car and trying to get across the country to find the freedom that they kind of naively assumed was out there everywhere. And the idea is that no matter where they try to find it, they find out that there's rules, there's rituals, there's things are also done by the book everywhere. It's just a different book.
Right. That's interesting. And what influenced the idea behind the story? Do you have any family members that are part of the Hasidic community, or
no? I saw. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all.
I saw an article in the paper. It's got to be about 17, 18 years ago now, that just said 2 Hasidic girls had gone missing, and they didn't. At that point, they didn't know what had happened to them. Are they, kidnapped? Are they murdered? Did they run away? Are they lost? Or did they just irresponsibly at a friend's house and never called home? And it was, and I at that point, since it was such a wide open thing, I started thinking about like what would be the, there's a movie in there, what would be the most interesting thing? And I thought the most interesting thing is if they chose to leave and run away, and then why would they leave? And I just followed that thread, and it turned out they had run away. And then this isn't based on what actually happened to those girls, because at the time I didn't know what happened. I found out they had run away.
Sure.
And so I just kind of ran with it and made up my own versions of the two characters, and not knowing anything about the real two girls. And since then, there have been funny coincidences where I've run into people that knew those real two girls, and I found out a lot about what's become of them in real life. But again, it really doesn't have anything to do with my film, because it was based on a lot of my own imaginings and suppositions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought the acting seemed so natural between Taylor Rose and Jill Schachter. Their performances as the Hasidic Jewish girls, they really... It actually took me about 30 minutes into watching the movie to realize that they were actors. I'm like, did he get actual people? And I mean that as a testament to their acting, because there seemed to be such an authenticity to their performances. And tell me a little bit about how that was achieved.
Well, I agree with you. I think they're both phenomenal actors, and in a funny way, they couldn't be further away from what those characters are. Taylor Rose, not only is not Hasidic, she's not Jewish, she's Italian. Yeah. And, we joked that when we first cast her in the role, there were a couple things I had never thought or nor was allowed to ask during the casting process. She wasn't Jewish, she didn't know how to drive a car, and she doesn't eat meat. And the character is supposed to drive a car, and there's a crucial scene where she's, eating a non-kosher meal. And Jill is far from being a Hasidic girl. She was a working actress, and she was on Broadway in Les Miserables when she was a kid, playing the little girl in that. And
I had actually recognized her. It was about like 25 or 30 minutes into the film. I'm like, oh, I know who she is. Then I realized, I'm like, yeah, those are actors. But that's a testament to their performance.
Totally, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I was blown away by what they were able to bring to it, and they immediately became indelibly those girls to me that it's hard to imagine anyone else playing those roles now in my own head.
Yeah, I can see why. What was one of the biggest challenges of making that film?
Aside from the standard low budget challenges of making a low budget movie, which we had all of those, to me one of the funnier challenges was that since we shot in a real Hasidic community and real Hasidic homes and real Hasidic schools and stuff, it was kind of funny if you make a film about kind of the frustrating unfairness of these sort of arbitrary religious rules, but then you shoot in a way where you are forced to abide by them to shoot in the community. We had to keep the women on the crew dressed by Hasidic standards, like down to the wrists and up to the collarbone, and skirts down to the ankle and things like that. But also, the crew couldn't be working on Shabbos, on the Sabbath, Friday into Saturday. So, and we could, the crew, the meals had to all be at least to, if they were going to go into the home, all the food had to be to Hasidic standards and to kosher standards. And so in a way that was a funny challenge. And also the community, we're shooting in a community that there's some degree of trepidation that we're going to, not just insult them, but just portray them falsely or unfairly. And we tried really hard. I did a lot of research to try and see if we could make sure that we, not just were accurate, but we were not being unkind in any way.
Did they end up seeing the finished film?
A couple of them did. We reached out to different sects, and the Satmar and some of the other sects didn't want to have anything to do with us and wanted nothing to do with the film production. But the Chabad Lubavitch sect was very kind and very open, and they have a media liaison, which is kind of an unexpected thing. And that media liaison, Rabbi Mati Seligson, was kind enough to come out to our Manhattan Film Festival screening and watch the movie. I invited him. I said, please, bring your wife, bring anyone else you want on me. And since they had never asked to read the script while we were shooting, and they'd never asked to see anything, they never asked for approval of any of the content, even though I told them that it was, there's some harsh words about Judaism and the harsh fundamentalist Judaism and the Hasidim in general. they didn't have any complaints about that. They let us make the movie we wanted to make, and he came out, and I told him, even if you hate the movie, please feel invited to come up and join me for the Q&A and say anything you want about it. It's which was maybe a dumb thing for me to offer, but he got up and he kind of, in a nice way, he kind of took over the Q&A, which was fine. I kind of invited him to do that, and but he didn't have any real complaints other than some very small inaccuracies. He thought that, but other than that, I think he, it felt pretty warmly received by the few Hasidic people that have seen it, and we even had a woman who was a former Hasidic runaway, who now works as an actress and a consultant to Hasidic-based projects, and she came out and brought some former Hasidic friends of hers who all really seemed to embrace it. So it felt like we'd not only didn't offend people, it seemed like we moved some of the right people, which seemed good.
That's amazing. Did the film evolve at all from when you first had the inception of an idea for the film to the finished film, as far as tone or story or in any way?
Well, absolutely. The first version I wrote a good number of years ago, right when the story was fresh, maybe 17 years ago. I wrote about half of it. I wrote the beginning and the ending and got them to where they were going, and then sort of didn't fully explore that. I knew where I wanted the story to go and how I wanted it to end, and then put it aside while I worked on other projects for years. And so when I went back to it, I was older and I'd seen more, and I had time to sort of let that percolate in my mind. And then as we were shooting in the Hasidic world, learning new things, it brought up things that got woven into the fabric of it. And one of my actresses was kind enough to point out an opportunity I was missing. I don't want to give away the ending, but she actually helped to sort of hand me the idea that really enriched the ending, the part about the part relating to the father in the ending, and just suggested that I follow the thread that I had left dangling there about the one character's father, and write a new scene to sort of resolve that, and I did that, and so that developed in the few weeks before we started shooting.
Yeah, it was a great scene.
Oh, thank you.
Pulled it off well.
Thank you.
I also love the scene, and this doesn't give away, I think, too much of a spoiler, but when she's at her house and she kind of uncovers a portion in her room that you see that she has a poster from... It's a
David Bowie poster.
That's right, it's David Bowie. But I just love the fact that she likes like glam rock and stuff like that.
Yeah, I had my heart set on it being Bowie because I thought Bowie represents, changing your identity and choosing your identity and like sort of taking on and putting off different guises over the course of, your life. And I really wanted it. And the song we chose that we used in that scene is a Bowie song. And it was a bit of a hassle to get it, which is understandable because they don't know us. Right. But the idea was that it's like I wanted her to be hearing like, sex and danger and intrigue and yearning and all this stuff. And that like the idea that, music would be her window out of that world. She wouldn't have any other way to encounter the multiples of different experiences that she's nowhere near in her Hasidic world. And I thought like just, sometimes it seems like just hearing a bit of really impassioned music from another world can just open a window into your world. And so and I thought Bowie's the perfect example of that because it's rock and roll and it's sex and danger and, all of those things.
Absolutely. I thought it was just cool to see how things that, just a lot of people take for granted, like listening to rock or just, being involved or appreciating pop culture in any sort of way. For her, it was so taboo when it was like a reveal in the room that I thought that was really interesting.
Oh yeah, thank you.
That like it's like what people take for granted. It's like you can't take those sort of things for granted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, I just want to comment again, just like their chemistry. I thought between Jill and Taylor was so amazing. Is that something? Did you cast who did you cast first?
Well, it's kind of funny. We oftentimes in movies they do what's called a chemistry read, where you cast actors and then you have them read with each other. And we didn't have time to do that, so they were cast separately, and they'd never met till only maybe 2 days before we started shooting, and it was a gamble. But I really had this feeling that they would have a chemistry together, and I don't know if it's even a bad thing to say. Like another pair of actresses who were really, really wonderful actresses had audition for the roles, and it came down to that pair or this pair. In my head, it was down to two pairs. Like I couldn't see them sort of mixed and matched as pairs with each other. And the other pair were lifelong best friends, actual lifelong best friends. And I just had to go with my gut. And I really thought, I like the reason I chose these two girls was they actually felt like that's what I saw in my head while I was writing it. And I felt like it was my first film, and I thought it felt like it was going to be a better choice to know that it was going to feel like the story I had in my head while directing. It was going to make it easier to direct and know that I'm not trying to make them into these characters, but rather that they're already going to embody them in my own mind. And so I chose these two girls that had never met, and then they became, now they're really lifelong friends. And
That's right.
Yeah, their chemistry was immediate, and everybody assumed that they'd known each other forever, and it became a joke. People would ask, "How long you guys have worked together?" And they're like, "Oh, we met last week."
I love that. It paid off because I think the actors that you chose really were authentic to the story.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just ran into Jill on the street in Times Square maybe a week ago, and just by chance, coming home from a mixing session for my second movie, just.
Nice. When was the last time you had seen her prior to that?
It hadn't actually been that long because we did a lot of screenings for it over the last 2 years at festivals, and she's been kind enough, if she's within reach, they both, if they can, they come out to the screenings. But it's funny, we have them both in the second movie too, just in tiny roles. Yeah. Because I kind of like the idea they're great actors. Why not use them again? They're not the leads in it just because thematically it wouldn't work. But and so I had just seen Jill on the screen in the mixing session. We were looking at stuff, and I walked out, and so I just literally walked away from seeing you on a big screen like 3 blocks from here. Kind
of serendipitous.
Yeah, exactly.
So before getting into talking about your latest film, Faraway Eyes, which I saw, by the way, as a courtesy, it was like a special screening hosted by Patty Schumann and Dave Steck, who run Yo-Fi Fest in Yonkers. Shout out to Patty and Dave.
Yeah, they're great.
You kind of mentioned what attracted you initially into filmmaking when you first saw Star Wars, but I think what keeps you attracted to filmmaking?
I always knew in my life I wanted to try to be an artist in some way, and then I think, that idea, other people wiser than me have said that, film is a combination of all the art forms, and with the editing being the one art form that's, the only thing that's exclusive to filmmaking, but the other one, it's drama comes from theater, and the cinematography comes from photography and painting and drawing and all those things, and the writing comes from writing, and so it's like it seems like it's the
it's an art form that's all encompassing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's what attracts me to it as well.
Yeah, and the tools are infinitely effective. If like we all might fail trying to get them to work, but it's there to be done. Like the masters of the craft seem to be able to find a way to make as one director said, like anything you can imagine, you can film. Yeah. And you may have to work hard to figure out how to do it.
Kubrick said that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And what are some films and filmmakers? Apparently Kubrick was definitely an influence. So who are some influences on you as you were growing up?
Well, I became pretty obsessed with Kubrick pretty early on, and also Martin Scorsese, and I love Terrence Malick. I love the Coen brothers. I grew up loving Hitchcock. I grew up loving Steven Spielberg. And then just more and more, Francis Ford Coppola, Michael Cimino. That period of the 70s where sort of the maverick period of 70s directors, where the industry seemed to be centered around just letting directors make the movies that they want to make.
Having a real perspective on
right.
films.
Yeah, and it was like the way the French auteur theory from decades before that was sort of transferred over to America right around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and David Lynch.
Yeah.
Also.
So tell us a little bit about Faraway Eyes. What motivated? Tell us first of all the premise of the film.
Well, I always say it's a black comedy about a love story set in the afterlife, and it's meant to be like romantic and darkly funny and darkly serious, and we're trying to. It's kind of a roller coaster ride of clashing tones, but the idea came from it starts with a character dying after a bad breakup, and I started thinking after a breakup that it's funny that right after a breakup is when you're expected to then get out there and try and find love, but usually your head's all spun around and you're in a bad place about life and love and relationships, but that's when everyone's telling you to get out there and try it. And I started trying to like think of a way to illustrate that idea that, that if you had to find love right after somebody had broken your heart, how would you do it? And then what would love mean to you at that point? And and if you, I literally, I didn't nearly die, but I had a thing driving away from the breakup, driving on the highway where I kind of thought about, if that had just changed right there, and if I had been killed on the highway, I would have died single. And if, I sort of ran with the idea from there that like, well, if I had died single and had arrived in an afterlife, which I don't believe in, and it had been told that, oh no, you have to have love to pass over, then what would love be if it was separated from the notion of children or careers or financial success, and if it was just stripped bare to its essence and you were forced to find love that meant something unto itself? What would that be, and what would it mean to you to have found it? Yeah. If that's not too much to say pretentiously in a podcast.
I think it was a cool concept, and one thing I've loved about it is that the afterlife is also here in New York City. It's like they're among us, but we can't see them. That sort of thing. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, thank you.
It was also cool seeing Christina Ricci in the movie. I think that was great. What was it like working with her?
It was great. Yeah, she's a terrific actress. She's a terrific person. She's sweet and sort of just obviously amazing at her craft. Absolutely easy to direct because she already, we had come to an understanding of what the character was and how it was going to work in the very first time we met about it. And so aside from, tiny little thoughts along the way, she already had the character, pretty perfect when she walked in the door. And, our mutual conception of it was pretty solid. And so, she was just, she was just amazing on set, and how, it's not anything like her. And of course she just can become this, as actors do, she can just become this completely other person. And it's absolutely convincing on screen and in person too. But she's, and the funny thing is I had worked with her when she was a kid. When I was first starting out, I was a camera assistant on a movie she did when she was 11. And
which film was that?
It's a film nobody seems to have really seen called Cemetery Club. She did it between the two Addams Family movies. Yeah. And so she was famous from the first one and hadn't yet done the second one. She was well known from Mermaids with Cher before that. And it was this amazing movie with an incredible cast. Well, I mean, it's not an amazing movie. It's a good movie with an incredible cast that had all these Oscar winners. Everything. It was like Ellen Burstyn, Danny Aiello, Olympia Dukakis, Diane Ladd, Wallace Shawn, Catherine Keener.
Wow.
And I'm probably forgetting somebody, Jerry Orbach, and this amazing cast. And, Christina Ricci played Catherine Keener's daughter and Ellen Burstyn's granddaughter. And so when we cast her, I kept thinking, well, this is funny that, like 30 years later, I'm directing her. And I brought it up to her, and she certainly didn't remember me, but she said she kind of didn't particularly remember doing that. She remembered doing the movie, but she didn't really have any firm memories of it. It wasn't a huge part. She just, but it was just a funny little coincidence to have,
It's very funny.
Yeah.
And it actually ties into just your film, just the ensemble nature of this particular film. With, I noticed you had a lot of familiar faces like Jackie Cruz from Orange is the New Black, and veteran New York actor Michael Rispoli from Billions and The Sopranos, amongst many other things. And so I thought that was cool. Yeah, that was an ensemble piece, which was great.
Oh yeah, thank you. We have a really brilliant casting director who helped make sure that we got as an amazing actor in almost every role that was worthy of anyone being in it. And so she helped, and we went through a lot of actors trying to find just the right person for each role. It's like you don't just want a name per se in the role. You just want somebody who's going to embody it. Yeah. And so, we had Jeannie Berlin, who's Oscar nominee, Elaine May's daughter. I don't know if you knew her, but she's terrific, and we were very lucky to get her too.
Amazing. And I thought the music was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the score of the film.
We got really lucky with that too. We have some original music by Angelo Badalamenti, who did the music for Twin Peaks and all the David Lynch films since Blue Velvet. And we also have some score from the amazing Joseph Lo Duca, who did the music for a lot of the Sam Raimi films, the Evil Dead movies, and some TV series like Xena, Warrior Princess, and Hercules, and Spartacus, and stuff. And then we have some original songs, just like in the previous film, by Aaron Lee Tasjan, who's a friend of mine who is an amazing musician. And then just like the other film, we have a couple of songs from Jesse Malin, who's a friend of mine, is an amazing musician as well.
Yeah.
And so the music's always been a really hugely important thing to me. The cut you saw was more of a preview cut that was about 8 to 10 minutes longer than what we have now as the finished cut, and a lot of the music's been swapped out, but some of the things that I imagine you probably really liked, like the Aaron Lee Tasjan stuff, that's still in, and some other things have been switched out, but I'm hoping you like them just as much or better.
Absolutely. How was the experience of making this film different from your first feature? Or was it different? I mean, every film is different, right? So
yeah.
So how would you contrast it?
It was definitely different. It was, we didn't have any visual effects on the first film, which right off the bat was different because, in the second film there's a bunch of them because of the afterlife component, and so there's a lot of time-consuming stuff you have to do where, working with green screen and, trying to make sure that, that camera positions are, measured for purposes of visual effects and things like that. So that was right off the bat a big difference. But also the second one was a bigger budget, so a few more things were possible, but largely that went to the effects and as you'd expect. But it was definitely different coming in as no longer a first-time filmmaker, because we were lucky and we were able to show. About a week and a half into the shooting of the second film, we had our premiere for the first film, and the premiere went really well, and our cast of the second film came out and saw the first film, and I think they already, had total faith in me as a director, but I think it was a nice bit of reassurance to show them, like, oh, there's the film that I did before, and I think they, some of them told me they were very moved by the writing and the directing and the characters and stuff like that, and I think, it definitely felt different not coming in feeling like you want to make sure people have faith in you. I think as a first-time director, there's at least a little bit of a sense of, people know that there's a chance you might not know what you're doing.
Right. You have to sort of prove yourself.
Right, and mostly people are very supportive and they want to help you. So it's like, I think having a crew, like you have an AD that just want to make sure that that you understand what needs to be done. And I felt like I did because I had so much experience before that. But I think, in the second film, some of the same crew, including, terrific AD, Dave Ebel, who had worked on music videos with me before that. And he knew that I knew what I was doing. And I feel like just gradually, with each film, I imagine there's more of a sense that people just know that, that they know that the captain of the ship has some sense of where the boat's going, which is helpful, I think.
People that aren't involved in filmmaking have no idea how important the role of AD is.
Yeah, exactly.
Shepherding things forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've worked that position myself over the years, only a couple of times because I hated that. It's such it's in a way a thankless job. It's an incredibly crucial job, but it doesn't feel like you do get a lot of appreciation from outside of the core group who understand what you're doing, and that's another reason I like to give David Bell a lot of credit, because he helped make sure we brought the day home each day, and came home with all the shots we needed, and I'm not organized enough to be an AD. I learned that on my first and second shoots as AD. I thought, as an AD, I would recommend you guys hire a better AD.
Yeah, it definitely takes certain personality types to really shine in that position. So I don't know if you're able to tell me Harry was telling me the greatest story ever about the movie The Irishman.
I think I can. I'll just say it with the hell. All right. So my friend Jesse Mallon, who's a musician, really didn't care for The Irishman when he saw it. He's a big Scorsese fan, and he's he's even appeared in a Scorsese film himself. He's in Bringing Out the Dead, playing a small role.
Co-written by Paul Schrader.
Right, exactly, yeah. And not one of Scorsese's better films, but it's got moments. But he loves Scorsese, and he wanted desperately for The Irishman to be great. And he had read, the book, I Heard You Paint Houses, and he was very familiar with it, couldn't have been more looking forward to it. And then he was very disappointed, didn't love the movie. So then I worked with Jesse on some of his music stuff, and we did a large-scale benefit show that happens every year in Jersey called The Light of Day. That's a benefit for Parkinson's research. And Bruce Springsteen shows up, not every year, but many years of the 20 years he's shown up. And so at this one, Bruce did show up, and he sang with Jesse. And after the performance with Jesse Mallon, we were in a hallway, and Jesse asked Bruce, Bruce had said publicly that he loved The Irishman. And he asked Bruce, so did you really like The Irishman? And Bruce said, "Yeah, I was the first time I saw it, I thought, I liked it, but with reservations. And then the second time I realized that's what you got to do is you got to see it a second time, and you gotta come to terms with its tempo, and then once you do that and you realize the movie it's trying to be, then I loved it." That's
amazing. Amazing impression.
Oh,
too.
thank you. I'm here all week.
I love The Irishman. And
I did too.
Particularly, I did appreciate it even more the second time when I was going. There are certain scenes that really were even more impactful.
Yeah, for me too.
That kind of segues into what I want to ask each guest coming onto the show is, what are a couple of your favorite movie scenes from any movie of all time? So we'll start off with, I guess, the first one.
The one I thought of when you asked was sort of the pair of final scenes, or towards the end of 2001, which is my favorite film. If I could split it up into two scenes.
Absolutely.
The scene where Dave Bowman disconnects Hal, spoiler alert, and it's just, I always thought it's amazing that a scene it's essentially like a completely dispassionate, in a sense, a murder scene or a revenge scene that's played out with such amazing cinematic precision and just such a delicate feeling as Dave goes into Hal's brain room to disconnect him. We're left with nothing but the sound of Dave's breathing and the sound of Douglas Rain's voice in the role of Hal, basically quietly and dispassionately begging for his life, and trying to manipulate, trying to cajole, trying to use logic, trying to gain sympathy, everything he can do. It's a computer trying to figure out how to beg for his life, and knowing that he has no physical means to stop him. And the way it's shot, the way the beautiful color of it, the fact that it's basically shot up with the actor hanging upside down, suspended on wires to give him the look that he's floating in zero gravity, and the way Hal is entirely depicted with that single, unblinking, unfeeling eye. And yet, I admit that when I watch the scene, I get choked up watching Hal lose it. And
which is pretty amazing, right? It's such an iconic scene, and it's pretty amazing because Hal is sort of the antagonist, beginning sort of the bad guy, and then you end up feeling bad for Hal.
And you think he's a peripheral character. You think it's just like the technology of the ship when you first meet Hal. That it's entertaining that he is what he is, but there's I think he's introduced in a way that you think it's just going to be a detail of their world, but it turns out. And the moment when he says, "I can feel it," when he's being cut off, when he says, he's acknowledging that that each time a little piece of his hardware is disconnected, when he says, "I can feel it," I think that's devastating.
Yeah, very impactful.
Yeah.
What's another scene?
Well, the second example I thought of from the same movie was the scene shortly after that, where Dave Bowman from 2001 has gone through into the monolith and across the universe to the other side, where he has now arrived in what is essentially a zoo type environment for humans, where he's being
In the film, it's depicted as a very fancy room.
Yeah. But it's like the idea is that it's sort of the natural habitat of a human. The way they've, the aliens who we never see have explored what's in his mind and have figured out how to make him feel like he's in a natural habitat, and they've left him there for observation. And the thing that always gets me about the scene is the way it's cut. It's it reminds me of when I was a kid. My dad said, "Oh, when you get older, it goes faster and faster." And in that scene, Dave sees himself a little bit further into his life, and then the film cuts to the older version of him, seeing the younger version of him fleetingly out of the corner of his eye, and then in another cut after that, the younger Dave is gone, and now we're seeing that scene from the perspective of the slightly older version, and they repeat that several times, and just in a short series of maybe 7 or 8 cuts, we go through the entire rest of Dave Bowman's life, and to the point where he's old and he's in the final moments of his life, and it's all done with these beautiful cuts that compress time and feel like the way, to me, that exemplifies and feels like the way getting older feels. Yeah. That passing through parts of your life, you have that thing of holy shit, I feel like, just a minute ago I was 30, and then I feel like, I can't believe that what on earth happened? I'm suddenly 40, and it feels like that depicted lovingly and beautifully and unmistakably on film. And I always thought that's just another of the many moments of mastery from Kubrick.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. So what's next on the agenda, Harry?
Well, finishing up Faraway Eyes and trying to get distribution for both films. We're in a position where, I feel good about setting up distribution for Faraway Eyes in the very near future. And even though Staring at the Sun is the older film, we're still seeking distribution for that, because I really feel like it has merit, and we won 41 awards and festivals all over the country for that, and so I feel like it's a tougher film to market because it just doesn't have Christina Ricci, for instance, in it, and it doesn't have as well known a cast, but I think it has as good a cast. No insult to anybody on either film, but I think they're both.
That just ties into the business of filmmaking. As a filmmaker, I could attest to that. That unfortunately, that's just the way it is. That
and there's just so much content out there. There's so many people making films, and there's so a lot of it is name driven now, and you can be a terrific actor, and if people don't know your name, they're not necessarily going to choose to click on your film on Netflix. Everyone, when you have a film out there, no matter what position it is, no matter what size it is, what budget it is, the first question people often ask is who's in it? Yeah. And if they don't know anyone in it, it's kind of hard to get their interest.
It's an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, films break through from that every year, and then, sometimes actors get famous in something else, and that helps a film that they did a few years ago, and that's, that could happen, but,
sure. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening with Staring at the Sun, for sure, because both those actors, they're fantastic.
Oh yeah, and some of the actors in some of the other roles in it too have also broken into. It's funny, Raul Castillo, who's in Staring at the Sun, and Nora Arnezeder, who's in Faraway Eyes. They're both in the new Zack Snyder film. I think it's called Army of the Dead. It's so it's like a big budget action film, and they just happened to they didn't know each other, but they were both in one of my films.
Cool. Small world.
Yeah, exactly. And I was trying to think what the other. I just had heard that Raul got cast in something else really big, And so sometimes that helps just to bring attention to a film that may have fallen through the cracks commercially a few years ago, but if it's got somebody that is now recognizable, then people can market that film.
Interesting. So is there any other news that you wanted to share? Any festivals that you want to shout out, or any premieres, or?
Well, let me ask you, we're not supposed to announce the festival premiere until Friday. So if I'm safe in doing that, because this won't exist until
safe.
Friday. Okay,
good. We could
right.
Hold off on it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah,
on your behalf.
Thank you. Yeah, we're premiering Faraway Eyes at the CineQuest Film Festival. We don't have the dates yet, but it'll be in the first 2 weeks of March. We're going to be screening 3 or 4 times at that festival. It's in San Jose, California, in Silicon Valley. And it's a really big, really nice festival. It's kind of a special environment. And we're going to be screening it there. And then
congratulations.
Thank you. Probably a bunch of festivals after that, I imagine. We're going to at least try for that. And, but it'll be a great way to show that film for the first time. And they do a good job of promoting, and they have nice big theaters, and they draw a good group of people.
Excellent. And how could people follow what you're doing? Do you have social media that you want to shout out, or?
Well, we have just a web page for each of the 2 films right now. There probably will be more once we do this festival. Right now, there's one for Staring at the Sun that is just staringatthesunmovie.com, and there's one for Faraway Eyes that's just farawayeyesmovie.com. And they're a little bit bare bones, but they're growing. And they should both, by about Friday, I imagine they should both have the trailers for both films up on them, because right now there's only one for Staring at the Sun. Our trailer's going to, as they say nowadays, drop online Friday. And, so that'll be attached to our website on that day. And you can check it out there. And on the cinequest.org website, you'll be able to look up. And if you happen to be in San Jose in March, you can come see the movie.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Harry. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
The FilmSEEN podcast is sponsored by Alphabet City Films. Hosted by Zeph Kota. Executive producer Jeff Cutler. Original music by Yuri Ryback. Thank you for listening.